AgWeek Weather is sponsored by Bremer Bank. Connect with a banker today at bremer.com.
Now that the majority of the fields are planted, how will the weather fare this growing season? Here's John with our AgriWeather outlook.
Summer marches along, at least get started anyway, and as we look at the next couple of weeks, finally starting to see some summertime temperatures building out into some areas of the Great Plains and Midwest. It's been, after a fairly mild winter, a very cool start to the growing season across many of these areas, and as this ridge of high pressure builds up, we start looking for ridge rider storms, and I'll explain what that means and why that could mean a difficult to forecast precipitation pattern over the next couple of weeks. Other thing that's going on is that the Gulf of Mexico and the nearby adjacent areas of the Atlantic, the ocean temperatures are quite warm and the pattern is looking fairly active, and we could be looking at the first tropical disturbances of the season down here in the Caribbean or in the Gulf, so it's something we'll have to keep an eye on because that can also affect the weather pattern. I'm just drawing the main polar jet stream on right now. There is a subtropical jet, but it's relatively weak in the summertime. There is ridging beginning to take place. It's been quite hot in the southwest, western Texas, and over the course of this week, that warm temperature pattern will be building northward as this ridge of high pressure begins to take shape in the Great Plains. I don't think we're going to see scorchingly hot weather getting up into Canada, but I think we may get some 80s and a few 90s getting up into North Dakota and eventually some areas of Minnesota later on in this week. The hot weather, though, won't likely last very long because the ridge that has drawn it northward will likely be progressive. We'll see some troughing, so some slightly cooler weather settling down into the Pacific Northwest and the northern Rockies. And once we get into this pattern with southwest flow of the jet stream, this produces storm systems that tend to ride along that jet and produce potentially severe weather and heavy rainfall along the jet and to some distance south of it, especially if it's being fueled by a warm and humid air mass. But the placement of the jet stream is critical, and as we are looking at an evolving weather pattern, it's going to be a little difficult to precisely pin down. I do expect over the course of the second week for this warm weather pattern to shift a little bit further eastward. I don't think we'll see any major cooling. That will stay up in Canada, but we will likely see the near 90-degree temperatures be fairly short-lived, maybe a few days worth into the northern plains. Showers and thunderstorms will be predominant over the southern Rockies, and it looks like some very unsettled weather over the Caribbean and the Gulf of Mexico, possibly tropical disturbance. Too early to tell on that. The second week of the, I should mention, there may be a few storms, but the second week is looking a bit stormier as that ridge begins to collapse a little bit. Probably some northern plains stormy weather, and the Gulf and Caribbean will likely continue to be fairly wet and potentially stormy.